Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by Bet365. My name is Dave Guidrelli. I'm joined by Harman Dial. Harman, it's officially off-season mode. I've seen a lot of people just kind of checking out, but not us. Not us. We're still going strong. We've got some stuff to talk about today. I usually say during the season and the off-season as well, I say we got a lot to talk about. We really don't have a lot to talk about, but we've got 8 teams to talk about because today we're going to talk about who in the Pacific Division improved, who stayed neutral, and who got worse. We're going to do that right off the top. But before that, I want to tell everybody about our Super Chat charity sponsor this season and off season, the BC Mental Health Foundation. You want to make sure your question or comment gets on the show? Hit us with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat go to the BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. Now, Jacob, technical producer Jacob Lazar, if we had to ballpark it, and Harman, I want you to give a guess too, how much money have we raised for the BC Mental Health Foundation since, when did we start this? We started this in training camp in Penticton, I believe. Yeah. So how much have we raised over a year? I think it's
know
over
the actual number. I know the actual, although I know the number between all 3 shows, us, Scarce and Price, Rinkwide. So I don't know what our show specifically was, but
do you know who's gotten the most Super Chats?
I'm pretty sure it's Rinkwide, thanks in large part to the Abbey playoff run. There was one guy dropping $5 every single show. A few others that dropped in, especially after they won the championship. There's quite a few Super Chats that night. So
I think it's over 1,000. I think it's well over 1,000. So I'm locking that in. But we'll get the final tally and we'll figure out. Harm, do you have a guess?
For just our show or all 3?
Give our show.
Our show, I would guess around $500.
All right. Cool. I guess 501, Jacob. I changed my guess. I'm kidding. I'm joking. Not doing that. What game is that where you do that? Wheel of Fortune. No.
Price is Right.
No. Price is Right. That's
Wheel of Fortune.
Hot start on a Monday afternoon. It is getting hot outside, so we'll see how long we end up doing a show for. But I did want to say this as well, because you and I, well, the 3 of us, figured out kind of our off-season content plan and our schedule. So I just wanted to run this by everyone and make sure, well, not run it by, I'm telling you how it's going to be. We're going to be doing a show on Wednesday this week. And then if anything significant happens, we'll do one on Friday as well. Next week, we're going to do a show on Tuesday and then one on Thursday. I will not be here for the Thursday show, but then I'll be back for Tuesday, the 22nd. And then you and I think Irfan Ghaffar are going to do a show on July 24th. And then Harm's taking all of August off, so I'll be in and out in August. I'm getting married in August, so we're still going to be doing our thing of weekly shows. I think there's going to be like last week of July and last week of August, we won't be doing any shows, but then we'll be back Labor Day. I just like to spell it out for everybody because we do go all off season. We don't do okay, we're going to take, well, Harman does, but we don't do we're going to take a month off thing. We do shows every week. And of course, I'm saying that in jest. Well-deserved time off.
And we'll keep Family Feud going all off season. So it might not always fall on a Thursday. Like this week, we're only doing Monday, Wednesday. So we'll be playing Feud on Wednesday, which means fill out the surveys. It's your last chance to do it before.
And we need a quick turnaround because we got to play Feud on Tuesday because there ain't no way I'm letting Irf play Feud in my place on Thursday. You know what I don't need, boys? I don't need another person sitting in my chair for Family Feud and then winning. And then everybody thinking it's all my fault that we lose.
I feel like it should be dependent on how you perform Thursday. If you perform well, you get to play on next Tuesday.
The following week, yep, sure.
If you fumble, then Irf gets a spot start on Thursday.
Sure. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair way to put it. Pressure's on. We'll do it. We'll play Family Feud on Wednesday's show this week. But I just wanted to spell that out for everyone. All right. Without further ado, let's get to it. We're going to do a Pacific Division preview later in the offseason, I'm sure. But think of this as kind of our Pacific Division free agency review. Because let's be honest, offseason moves, we don't take time off. All the GMs are gone. Like the GMs just go away. All the insiders, you see them all posting the photos from their cottages. It's like, I didn't know it was cottage season just yet. But anyways, there's not going to be a lot more work coming. You wouldn't think. There might be a signing here or there, but for the most part, we know what these teams are going to look like heading into next season. So with that, I wanted to talk about each team in the Pacific Division. Jacob's presented some beautiful graphics for us, and Harm, you and I talked about, off air, who's trending up, who's trending down. Jacob, what order do you want to go in? Do you want to just throw graphics on and I'll start talking about them?
I mean, I've got them in alphabetical order, and I feel like that's probably an organized way to go about things.
Okay, let's start with Anaheim. Let's do it. Let's start with them Anaheim Ducks, who we have as trending up. Players in: Mikael Granlund, Chris Kreider, Peter Mrazek, Ryan Poehling, unsigned RFAs still, and this is business that still is going to get done. Lukas Dostal, Drew Hellison, Mason McTavish. Players out, these are significant as well: Robbie Fabry, John Gibson, Oliver Shillington, Brett Leeson, Isaac Lundstrom, Brock McGinn, Trevor Zegras. Again, players in is what really matters here. Mikael Granlund, Chris Kreider, Peter Mrazek, Ryan Poehling. Harm, we have them as trending up. Explain that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't love the Ducks offseason, but there's no doubt that they got somewhat better when you add Granlund and Kreider, especially if Kreider can bounce back. He's a really important X factor for the Ducks because this past year, he scored just over 20-ish goals. Couldn't really drive play at 5-on-5. And he was a shell of his former self, but he was also playing through a back injury and vertigo. So injury plague season, is he going to be healthy this coming season? And if so, does he bounce back and become closer to the 30-goal plus version of himself, especially for a Ducks team that struggled in the power play? We know that Kreider at his best is one of the premier net front power play scorers in the NHL. The Ducks power play, I think, was 32nd in the league this past season. So if he can stay healthy, bounce back to where he was 2 years ago, that would be a significant boost. Granlund, we don't necessarily love the contract, but he's going to be a nice addition in their middle six. But in having said all of that, and it's the bull case for Anaheim isn't just the players they brought in, right? It's coaching change. As far as Greg Cronin out, it's not so much that I'm a huge fan of Joel Quenneville, and we know the take I had earlier when he was hired, when I basically made the case that I didn't think he should be a head coach in the NHL anymore. But the point being, it's Greg Cronin out that I think is going to help this Ducks team. They could have hired anybody, and in my mind, that would have been an improvement, especially when it comes to the offensive side of the game. So I think coaching could unlock breakouts from a lot of these younger offensive guys they have. Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish, Cutter Gauthier, even on the blue line, Zellweger, Minchikov. These are guys that could take significant steps forward. And, this past season, Jackson Lacombe was really the only young Anaheim player that became a star. So they've got internal sort of a push coming. But for reasons I'll sort of mention later, even though they're trending up, I still am not sold on them as a true playoff threat this coming season.
Agreed. I think this is the wildcard team if everything goes right. Now, this is going to be a common theme in our Pacific Division that we're talking about right now, is a lot of teams, these younger teams, have young players that could hit. Now, I think the LA Kings are a really solid example of why we don't say, oh, well, this is what's going to be the outcome for this young player. They got to do it before you start penciling them in. And I think that's why you making the case that this team is probably not a real playoff threat. The thing I said last week, and I think this is all that really matters for Canucks fan, is that they're going to be a tougher out. Like, they're going to be tougher to beat this season. And that means it's going to be harder to get points in the Pacific Division. But do I think Anaheim's still going to finish below the Canucks in the standings? Yes, I do. And that's going to be part of our poll question. So let's move on to Calgary here.
Well, the other thing I wanted the point I wanted to make for why I am not sold on the Ducks being able to take the next step is you look at their underlying profile at 5-on-5. They ranked 30th in the NHL at controlling 5-on-5 shot attempts. The only teams that were worse were the San Jose Sharks and Chicago Blackhawks. Now, Anaheim, in terms of points in the standings, did a lot better than those teams, but that's because they had some of the best goaltending in the NHL, not just from Dostal, but Gibson, who they traded. Gibson had something to the effect of a .916 save percentage. They moved him to Detroit. So that looks like a team to me that still gives up a lot defensively, that still doesn't manufacture a lot offensively in terms of shots and chances. Their record was better than their underlying process sort of indicated this past season. And the point being, they've got a lot of road that they need to sort of improve before they are actually like consistently competitive.
Let's go to the Calgary Flames, who I was very high on this past season. And we see it here on this graphic. Players in: Ivan Prosvetov, never heard of him. Unsigned RFAs: Jeremy Poirier, Connor Zary. Players out: Tyson Barrie, Anthony Mantha, Kevin Rooney, Jared Snorty, and Dan Vladar. Those players out, like, we have them listed as neutral. And I think that's because if this graphic were blank, I think we'd have the exact same reaction. None of these pieces coming in or out actually matter. Is that a hot take? Maybe Anthony Mantha, but he didn't play for the Flames this past season. The guy had a really tough season when it came to injury luck, so he didn't really play for the Flames. So the version of the Flames that we saw last year didn't include Anthony Mantha. So with that, I look at them and say this could just be blank. This might be a really short conversation, and really, the simple fact of the matter is the thing that the Flames are kind of banking on, and the part that they're in their retool, rebuild, call it what you want, the part they're in right now is we have a lot of young players. None of them are really like, they don't have like a first line center coming in the pipeline, right? Let's see who becomes more than what we originally thought they could become. Right? Like that's the kind of prospects that the Calgary Flames have. And they've got a bunch of them. They've got a bunch of those guys where it's like, okay, if this guy hits, he's probably like a middle of the pack contributor, but you still need those. Those are good to have. But can one of those guys really exceed what we think their ceiling is and become a first line center, become a first line defenseman, first pairing defenseman? Can someone exceed our expectations? And that's really the name of the game for the Calgary Flames right now.
Rasmus Andersson is still a storyline to track and monitor, of course, as well. There's been a lot of reporting on how Andersson and the Flames are far apart when it comes to contract extension talks. There have been rumors about him on the trade block, and apparently he only wants to
go to Vegas.
Extend in Vegas. We'll see what happens with that. The Flames could opt to keep him and sell him at the trade deadline instead. But that's a storyline to sort of monitor. It's possible that he gets dealt in the offseason. This summer is a little bit strange where it still feels like there are dominoes to fall on the trade market when you look at Andersson potentially, Bowen Byram, the Marco Rossi situation hasn't been resolved in Minnesota. So there are still, and even among veterans, right? Like Pittsburgh, that team was highlighted as they're the only clear seller this offseason. They haven't sold anybody off. They haven't sold off Erik Karlsson yet, who they'll probably have to retain on to be able to find a trade partner for. But
they
also like
Anthony
Rust
Mantha.
Rust, and then Raquel as well, right? So it feels like there's still somewhat significant players that could be moved. And I look at Calgary and Andersson as a key piece that if he gets dealt, that's a serious blow for the Flames blue line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Andersson's getting dealt. I think they're going to trade Andersson this summer. I think it's a smokescreen saying, "Oh, we might do it at the deadline." They're going to do it this summer. I think. I think at least we'll see how that one plays out. All right, next up on our list would be the Edmonton Oilers, the Stanley Cup runner-up twice, trending down, and dare I say, for a second off season in a row, we've got the Edmonton Oilers trending down. Players in: Curtis Lazar, Andrew Mangiapane, and Riley Stillman. Players out: Victor Arvidsson, Connor Brown, Drake Caggiula, Evander Kane, John Klingberg, Corey Perry, Derek Ryan, and Jeff Skinner. Now, the thing you'll see on that list of players out is not many, let's call them big contributors. It's not quite the level of the Calgary Flames where you say, okay, none of those players matter to the team, because Evander Kane did matter to the Oilers last year, not in the regular season, but he did play a factor in their playoff run. But for the most part, and Corey Perry, we can't forget Corey Perry. For the most part, though, that is a pretty insignificant list of players out, but it still is a lot more players out than in. And as I said, with Perry, with Kane, like Perry was playing first line minutes for them in the season and in the playoffs. That matters a lot. This is a team that is trending down, but I had them closer to neutral as well. I will say that I think they're neutral / trending down. They're in between somewhere in there.
They're slightly worse on paper. And ultimately, they're still, in my mind, the best team in the Pacific on paper. When you have Connor and Leon, you have that high-end gear that they have, especially now that, and this is where we could have the conversation of, are we comparing where the Oilers are at right now compared to how they finished the playoffs or compared to the start of the season, because you could definitely argue that at least on the back end, they're better now that Jake Wallman has come in and he was a terrific top four sort of puck mover for them. So yeah, I mean, you could say probably closer to neutral than trending down, but the point being they're slightly worse on paper just because they're likely going to have to, barring any further changes, rely on Podkolzin to play top 9 minutes for them again. And, you don't have Perry, who was playing your top 6 at times. Kane, through the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, was valuable in their middle 6. Connor Brown was a nice middle bottom 6 piece for them. And you really only have Mangiapane sort of coming in to fill that top 9 void.
I will say this, Matt Savoy put up, what did he put up this year? He had a good year in Bakersfield. Yeah, 54 points, 19 goals in 66 games. He's someone that, again, 21 years old, right shot center. He's someone that I'm at least keeping an eye on for, okay, he could be someone that contributes to this team that we weren't really expecting. But we should repeat ourselves. Man, oh man, would it be nice for that team to have Dylan Holloway for this upcoming season as well. I also want to say this about the Oilers. We're doing the same thing of everybody just forgets that the goaltending is a problem for that team. We do it every year. I don't know why fans put up with it. It seems like a talking point that comes from the team. I don't really know how else to put it, but my feed every year has, during playoff time, people complaining about Stuart Skinner and complaining about the goaltending, rightfully so. And then when it becomes time to actually talk about acquiring a goaltender, I just see a bunch of tweets of like, actually, Stuart Skinner's save percentage here looks great when compared to this, or whatever, hoops people want to jump through. It happens every year where they talk themselves out of it. It's happening right now. I don't know if they're going to get a goaltender this offseason. I'd say it might be a little bit too late, but I think the goaltending is going to be a problem for this team again next season.
They need an upgrade for the playoffs, but
Yep.
The issue that they're going to run into, or at least for this offseason, if they're hunting for upgrades right now, is whether there's a goaltender who's high end enough to actually be an upgrade on Stuart Skinner. There's nobody left on the free agent market who's trading a talented starting goaltender this offseason, especially now that Gibson is off the board. There just aren't many obvious targets is the problem for a team like the Oilers, and it won't hurt them. It likely won't hurt them that badly in the regular season, just because the Oilers are that dominant at controlling play. And even this past season, they were 16th in the NHL, dead even in the league in terms of their team save percentage this past season. So even if they don't make an upgrade in net in the regular season, they'll be fine. It's just a matter of they'll need to do it before the deadline to actually have a better shot in the playoffs, because that's when they need the goaltending.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, you ready to move on from the Oilers?
Yep.
Okay, let's do it. Excuse me. Let's get to the LA Kings, the Los Angeles Kings, who we have talked about a few times already. They are definitely trending down. Players in: Joel Armia, Cody Ceci, Brian Dumoulin, Anton Forsberg, and Corey Perry. That's a nice piece, Corey Perry. Players out: Vladislav Gavrikov, Tanner Jeannot, Caleb Jones, Trevor Lewis, David Riddick, Jordan Spence. Now, with the exception of Spence and Gavrikov, I would say that's pretty insignificant on players out. But unfortunately, I would say the players in have a negative effect on this team, specifically adding Cody Ceci and Brian Dumoulin to the left side of that blue line.
Yeah, the blue line looks mid on paper. Between Edmondson, Dumoulin, and Ceci in your bottom four, you have guys that are reliable defensively, I guess, but can't really move the puck at all. Are bigger bodies that don't skate very well, and it makes them slower and older on the blue line. And now it puts a ton of pressure on Brent Clark to be a top four difference maker for them this coming season, especially because if you end up with issues in your bottom four, as far as Edmondson, Dumoulin, and Ceci being unable to move the puck, you would have previously looked at Jordan Spence as, okay, he's a player that you can lean on for heavier minutes because he's more of a mobile guy who has some of that skill on the breakout to compensate for some of those deficiencies. You don't have him as an option to lean on anymore. So back end is definitely a concern, but and I would say they're not a playoff lock the way that they have been in years past.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like their level, their baseline in terms of what they're coming off of this past season and how many years in a row they've made the playoffs is so high that even though they're worse, I still think they're a pretty good bet to make the playoffs. You're talking about a team that this past season was the second best team in the NHL at surrendering goals against behind only Winnipeg. And that was with Drew Doughty missing more than half the season. And of course, Drew Doughty isn't what he was in his prime, but if he gives you 70 to 80 games instead, that's going to make a positive impact on their blue line. And that goals against total wasn't a result primarily of just their blue line. Just as a team game, they're really well structured. Their forwards are really committed to both sides of the puck. And I'll also mention Quinton Byfield is a really intriguing player to watch for the Kings this coming season because he had 31 points in his last 32 games. Completely different player in the second half than he was in the first half. And if you get that second half version of him for a full year, and all of a sudden you're talking about Quinton Byfield as a 70+ point first line caliber player, then all of a sudden like that could compensate for them being a bit worse on the back end. And again, I mean, just their floor is so high because they were a 105-point team plus 44 goal differential. So even though they're worse, especially on the blue line, there are enough positives there, and their floor is so high that I still think that, put it this way, I still think they're more likely to make the playoffs than the Canucks.
Interesting. I was going to ask you that question, and I'm curious how people are going to vote in our poll question. I know we're talking to Canucks fans, but that would be one that I would look at and say it's almost 50-50, because I think the thing that people forget, and I'm not saying this is what you're doing at all, but the thing that people forget is that everything went right in 23-24. Then I think it's safe to say everything went wrong in 24-25. Like, what does this team look like if Thatcher Demko's healthy? What does this team look like if Quinn Hughes is healthy? An Elias Pettersson bounce back. Like, I don't think Elias Pettersson's putting up 40 points again. Like, I think Elias Pettersson's going to have some more production this next season. So with all of that, and I know I said if 3 times there, but those don't feel like big ifs, right? Those don't feel like the biggest of ifs. I think if they find a middle ground between the best season in 23-24 and the worst season this past season, if they find a decent middle ground, I think they're as good as the Kings' middle ground, if that makes sense. Like, if everything breaks right for the Kings, I think, yeah, sure, they're a better team than the Canucks, but I think both teams, like, at their cores on paper, I have the Canucks edging out the Kings just slightly.
Yeah, I can see that argument. I think they're close, but again, you're comparing, like, the sort of scenario you laid out is a positive one in terms of, like, the Pettersson thing and
sure,
health of your goaltending. You could do the same thing with the Kings as far as just if Quinton Byfield just repeats what he did in the second half, which typically you would expect a player at that age and with that pedigree to be able to build off of. And if Brent Clark was the top 10 pick, simply takes a step forward, like that could be enough on its own to compensate for, all right, they got a little bit slower and worse on the blue line. And again, we're talking about 105-point team plus 44 goal differential. Like I would still give put it this way, both teams can still make the playoffs because, you have 8 teams in your conference that make it. And whether you're comparing the Kings or the Canucks, you're really talking about third spot in the Pacific, because I think we can agree Edmonton and Vegas are top 2. So you can have both teams make the playoffs. It isn't like a case of, if LA is slightly better and they make the playoffs and the Canucks are hooped. So that's important to clarify right off the bat. And then secondly, I just think the Kings, I think their starting point is so high that even if they're worse, they'll land at a similar spot as the Canucks.
That's fair. These are two very evenly matched teams. Like, these are going to be 2 teams we're watching in the standings all season long. Speaking of wild card, actually, is that a good transition? I don't remember who our next team is. I think it would be San Jose. So not
technically, By name, it would be San Jose. By abbreviation, it's Seattle because SJ comes after SEA.
We're going by abbreviation in alphabetical order? Okay, that's news to me, but that's cool.
Sorry, that's
okay.
That's
I'm just joking around. I'm just joking around. Seattle. So that actually does segue well, because I was going to say, speaking of wildcard teams, Seattle, because if we're talking everything breaks right for the Seattle Kraken, at best, they're a wildcard team. They keep loading up on those middle six wingers, not to mention the Ryan Lindgren acquisition. Let's go through it. Players in: Andre Burakovsky, Frederick Gaudreau, Ryan Lindgren, Mason Marchment, and Matt Murray. Players out: Michael Eyssimont, unsigned RFAs, Riker Evans, and Capo Caco. That's interesting. We have them as neutral. I don't think it's fair to say that they're trending down beyond where they already were. I would say they're neutral / trending up ever so slightly, but all in all, we have them listed as neutral. And like I said, everything breaks right for the Seattle Kraken. There may be a wild card team.
Yeah, Burakovsky is actually player out rather than player in, but that doesn't really matter because he was a cap dump to Chicago. Their forward group is just full of middle of the lineup players. They have 4 third lines on their team, right? Like that's the best way to sum up the Seattle Kraken. And the only way that they're competitive for a wild card spot is if Beniers and Wright take massive steps, and if Caton, who is a top 10 pick, he's expected to make the team out of camp. If he ends up being, let's say a 50-point rookie, you combine that with Beniers breaking out and Wright maybe take another step, like that's your pathway. But I'll be honest, they just scream mediocre to me.
They're so mid, dude. They're the most mid team in the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if they're worth talking about that much, because just top to bottom,
I will say this:
it's uninspiring.
If the Kraken do the remarkable, then they better not post us if they make a wild card spot. But if this team finishes top of the division out of nowhere, this is getting clipped and being put on the Seattle Kraken socials, right? At the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. If they do that, they have full license and liberty.
And if you're listening to this, social media manager, if you try to do that and the team just makes the playoffs with the wildcard spot, we are going to dunk on you even harder, because that's not a win. I'm sorry. Yeah. If everything breaks right, your mid team is a wildcard team. That ain't worth clipping. I'll tell you that right now. All right, let's move on past the Kraken. Speaking of mid, worse than mid actually, but trending up nonetheless. The San Jose Sharks. Players in: Adam Gaudette, John Klingberg, Phil Kurashev, Nick Leddy, Dmitry Orlov, Colin White. Players out: Thomas Bordeleau, Walker Duehr, Alex Georgiev, Jan Ruta, unsigned RFAs, Daniil Gushin, and Jack Thompson. Let's focus on those players in. Friend of the show, Adam Gaudette joins the San Jose Sharks. John Klingberg joins from the Edmonton Oilers to the San Jose Sharks. Kurashev, Leddy, Orlov, Colin White. Who do you like from the players in list? Why do we have the San Jose Sharks trending up beyond just Celebrini taking a step, Will Smith taking a step, all that young talent that they have taking a step forward? What do you like on this players in list?
Orlov, he'll be a nice, second pair defenseman for them. He's struggling in the playoffs and he can't single-handedly drive the bus all by himself, but he's sort of going to be their Jake Wallman kind of replacement, which is important because that blue line this past season was by far the worst in the NHL. The problem for the Sharks is, while Leddy will be decent enough, while Klingberg will be fine, like they've brought in NHL defensemen, this is still a pretty horrific blue line. And that's, I think, the biggest bottleneck that they have as far as actually being consistently competitive, and why I expect them to still be relatively close to the bottom of the standings is I look at the Sharks and I love their collection of young forwards: Celebrini, Eklund, Will Smith, Tyler Toffoli in terms of a veteran that is still a really good player, but they don't have a ton beyond that. I still don't love their bottom six. Kurashev was bad straight up this year in Chicago. It's not that he's an exciting addition. And again, even though you brought in Orlov and Klingberg to improve your blue line, their top pair on paper, according to Daily Faceoff, is still Mario Ferraro and Timothy Liljegren. So that's an issue for them.
Okay, now I wanted to say this, excuse me, because this was a good comment about Seattle from Nello. He said Seattle's lineup looks like an expansion team. That's really true. Like Seattle looks like they're just constantly building an expansion lineup. So I like that comment from Nello. I want to make sure I read it. Yeah, the Sharks are an interesting one because, like you said, they are trending up, but they're still going to be insignificant. It's going to be the same story as Anaheim, if you ask me, where it's like, okay, yes, they're going to be a tougher out than they were last year, but they're still going to finish similar spot in the Pacific. I would think. I don't even think their best case scenario is a wild card spot. And I love Celebrini, but I don't think their best case scenario is a wild card spot. Am I being too hard on them?
No, I agree with you.
Okay. All right. We're going to bounce out of the Pacific really quick. We're going to go to Utah before Vegas because the Utah Mammoth, and you were the one that clamored for this, and I like that you did. They're a really interesting one because when it comes to the wild card race, and that's going to be something we talk about in the poll question in a second here. When it comes to the wild card race, like the Utah Mammoth are going to matter. The Utah Mammoth are going to matter for the Canucks, just like they did this past season when they were the damn Utah Hockey Club. Remember when we were doing the Tankathon and we were looking at playoff odds and I said, hey, look at that. 0.7% for the Canucks. There were the Mammoth with 0.5% right on their heels. Mammoth didn't go away, just like the Canucks didn't go away. Little hyperbole in there, but the Mammoth are going to be a story next season. Let's go over it. Trending up for sure. Players in: JJ Peterka, Scott Pernovich, Nate Schmidt, Brandon Tanev, Vitek Vanacek. Players out: Nick Bukestad, Robert Bortuzzo, Michael Carcone, Josh Stone, Michael Kesselring, Matthias Michelli, and unsigned RFAs Jack McBain, who they're taking to arbitration, which I wanted to talk about in anyone else. But focusing on the players out, those aren't significant names, with the exception of maybe Michelli and definitely Kesselring. We're big Kesselring fans on this show. And I mean, Josh Stone, I guess you could put in that conversation. Those aren't big departures, whereas I think the players in, certainly with JJ Peterka, but you could throw Nate Schmidt in that conversation as well, Brandon Tanev as well. Those are significant adds, if you ask me.
Yeah, the Peterka one especially. He is going to be an exciting fit for a team that loves to create a lot off the rush, that has speedy playmakers for him to play with. And the biggest point for Utah, even outside of the JJ Peterka acquisition, is I just look at the Mammoth as a team that is better than their record indicated this past season. You look at their underlying metrics this past season, they were top 5 team in terms of controlling 5-on-5 expected goals, meaning they spent a lot of time in the offensive zone. They controlled play like a bona fide kind of playoff team. And if I pull up the numbers right here, you look at the other teams that were around the same range as them. It starts with, one second, I'm just pulling it up. Carolina, Florida, LA, Edmonton, Utah, Winnipeg, Vegas, Colorado, and then Tampa. And then New Jersey to round out your top 10. So Utah was the only team that finished top 10 in 5-on-5 expected goal share that did not make the playoffs last season. And they were dead smack at 5th, sandwiched between Edmonton and Winnipeg. So a team with that kind of underlying profile, I would expect to take a step forward, especially when they've got some exciting young talent like Cooley and Gunther that I think are only going to get better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you on the Mammoth. I absolutely do. I think they're going to be a team to watch. And I'm glad we talked about them, even though they're technically not in the Pacific Division. Let's get back to the Pacific Division. The Vegas Golden Knights, who are one of few teams that we have as trending up, and unfortunately, they were already good. So them trending up means that they're probably finishing top 1 or 2 in the Pacific Division. Players in: Mitch Marner, Jeremy Lauzon, and Colton Sissons. Players out: Nick Hague, Victor Olofsson, Tanner Pearson, Nicholas Waugh, Ilya Samsonov, unsigned RFAs, Alexander Holtz. Okay, players in: Mitch Marner is obviously the significant one here. Is he the main reason that you have the Vegas Golden Knights as trending up?
Yeah, definitely. And of course, you have to factor in that Pietrangelo is going to be out for the season. So that's obviously a significant blow for their blue line. But what I would say is Pietrangelo wasn't really the best prime version of himself because of the injuries he had to play through anyway. And especially in the playoffs, he struggled mightily. So when I look at that Vegas blue line, yeah, he's going to be a blow, but you're not losing the number 1 defenseman version of Pietrangelo. You're losing the injured, banged up, shadow of himself version of Pietrangelo. And when I look at that Golden Knights blue line, they still have enough drivers when you have Theodore and Hannafin and McNabb, in my mind, is one of the more underrated defensemen. in the NHL. Not to mention still the possibility that they go out and add a right shot defenseman like Rasmus Andersson. I think their blue line will be just fine. And for me, just that Vegas top 9 looks terrifying on paper right now.
Yep. William Karlsson 3C shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, you go through it and you look at the lines that Daily Faceoff has constructed together. You got Eichel, Marner, and Dorofeev, who scored 30+ goals this past season. He's the worst player on your first line. Then you got Hurdle, Stone, Barbashev, Karlsson, Riley Smith, Brendan Saad. Man, that's a legit terrifying top 9, and they're going to be a playoff lock again.
Are you with me that Jack Eichel is about to have a career year?
We'll
94
see.
points last season. I think he gets 100 next season.
He could.
Mitch Marner. Like, Mitch Marner's going to get 100 points, and he's going to probably assist on a lot of Jack Eichel goals. I'm saying it now. Jacob, write it down. Jack Eichel, 100 points next season.
I think he'll be around the 90 to 100 point range, somewhere in there.
100 plus. Write it down, Jacob. All right, moving on. Let's get to the Vancouver Canucks. People were asking, why did we go out of order? Because we're saving the home team for last. The Vancouver Canucks, we have them as neutral. Players in: Evander Kane, P.O. Joseph, and players out: Phil DiGiuseppe, Noah Juleson, and Pius Suter. That could also be a blank one, I would say. But again, I think they're very neutral because we don't really know what Evander Kane could be on this team. We've had a lot of conversations about him already. Some people are very high on him. I said I liked the trade at the time. Some people are saying, what a waste. You shouldn't have that guy on the team. He's going to amount to nothing. I think they're neutral. I think this is a neutral one because like we show here, Noah Juleson, you have a 7th defenseman out because you've got young guys coming. You replace him with P.O. Joseph, who's fine. He could be that 7-8 guy. Players out: Phil DiGiuseppe, friend of the show, but really kind of insignificant when it comes to the big league team. And Pius Suter obviously is the big blow there. But if Evander Kane hits, you're not going to be talking too much about Pius Suter. So we have them listed as neutral.
Yeah, so I've heard a lot of people debating, would you prefer Kane at 5.1 or Suter at 4.1? And I don't care which way you lean, whether it's Suter, whether it's Evander Kane, it's close to a wash.
Exactly.
They're very different players stylistically, right? Like Kane has a much higher sort of offensive ceiling, and he fits a sort of like rarer identity as a power forward who gives you size, edge, toughness, willingness to stand up for teammates. But then Suter has a way higher defensive floor, whereas Kane is, he can be a defensive liability at times, and he doesn't really drive play. And with Suter as well, we know that he was a first unit contributor for a Canucks PK that ranked 3rd best in the NHL, and he's coming off a 25 goal season. And while I don't think anybody expects him to replicate that 25 goal campaign, that's still 25 goals that you sort of lost. So the point being, that's a wash. And then the bigger point for the Canucks is when we mention the neutral, we're talking about the actual players in and out.
Yeah.
But when you step back and look at, all right, who's returning, that's when you're expecting that a bunch of your internal guys are going to perform much better than they did this past season. And that's really the upside case for this team is expecting that Elias Pettersson is going to bounce back, is keeping your fingers crossed that Demko is going to stay healthy. That players like, Dakota Joshua, if he returns, Nils Höglander, that they can take steps. Your blue line is going to be a strength, especially compared to where it was at in the first half of this past season. So they're neutral in terms of on paper comparing the players that are in and out. But the point you made earlier is one that, we were talking about the show towards the end of the season, even that in 2023-24, that was the absolute best case version of the Canucks, and they sort of overachieved. And then this past season, when they were around a 90-ish point team, that was the absolute sort of worst case scenario where basically everything went wrong. And this team's true talent level is probably somewhere in between, in sort of like the high 90 point range. And so it'll be interesting to see how many of those X factor players end up performing closer to their ceiling than their floor.
Absolutely. And I think that's the case. That's the case for the Canucks. That's why when you think about what this team can be next season, that's why I have them somewhere in the middle of those two seasons. Let's get to our poll question because it's about this and it's about the Canucks. Let's get to our poll question, which is a presentation of Greta. By now, you know that Greta is a great spot to watch the big game, but did you know it's an even better spot for your upcoming party event? If you need a venue for a team building or summer social event, check out Greta. They've got the street food menu, they've got the arcade, and of course, they've got the bar. It's always a fun time with plenty of options. My personal favorite food item being the smash burger, and my favorite arcade game being the football game. A lot of fun. Make Greta your spot for your next event. For more info and to book your event, go to gretabar.com. Greta Bar YVR 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Let the games begin. Our poll question today, and I did want to say this as well. I do want to thank our friends at Pacific Toyota Dealers who leave in the offseason, usually come back in the season. I want to thank them for their support as we shift away from Pacific Toyota, at least for the remainder of the offseason. We appreciate their support all season long. Really appreciate it. But Greta, the poll question presenter today, where will the Canucks finish in the Pacific Division in 2025-26? Harm leading the way with 35.6% of the vote is third place. 34.7% say wild card. 17.4% says this team is missing the playoffs, and 12.3% say first or second. Now, I think the Oilers and Vegas are going to be a pretty clear 1 and 2. I have Vegas number 1, Oilers number 2, but then that third spot in the Pacific, that's a wide open spot, if you ask me. So I think I have the Canucks third, but it could be wild card. I think the Canucks are going to finish third in the Pacific, though. I have them as that.
Yeah, I lean towards wild card.
You have the Kings third?
Likely, yeah.
Okay.
But the point being, LA and Vancouver are probably going to be close.
Yeah.
Again, we can debate LA versus Vancouver for an hour if we wanted to, but the point being they're relatively similar, and so that's kind of going to be the main race to keep an eye on. And that third spot in the Pacific could be significant because whoever's left over is going to be left battling for wildcard spots.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it could get competitive with teams like Utah, Minnesota, St. Louis.
Exactly.
Those are going to be really solid teams to have to beat out. So
third in the division matters. It's going to matter this year because, like, even this year, you look at it, I think it's going to be similar this next season coming up. Both wildcard teams were from the Central Division. Like, that's going to matter next season. That's going to be, I think it's going to be the same thing next season.
Yeah, and ultimately, I still think that I think the Canucks are probably greater than a 50% chance to make the playoffs, but it's going to be a tight race, especially because, I mean, you look at the Blues, for example. Look, they were amazing in the second half of the season. The coaching change with Jim Montgomery did them wonders, and so it's not so much like we can talk about the upside case for the Canucks and the positivity. What you almost also have to do is look at, all right, like who's coming out, like who made the playoffs this past season that is going to come out that you feel really confident in. And that's where that's the perspective where it's a little bit more interesting to have some of those conversations in the West, because there are a lot of solid teams. There isn't a lot separating that, like, LA, St. Louis, Minnesota, Vancouver, Utah kind of like tier of teams.
I will say Calgary. Like, Calgary was...
But they didn't make the playoffs.
I know, but they finished with the same amount of points as a team that made the playoffs. They're certainly in that conversation, or they were this past season. I said it earlier. I don't think they're in that conversation next year. I don't. I don't think... Like, and the one thing I didn't even say about Calgary is all their vets are getting older, too. Like, Nazem Kadri's not going to repeat the year yet. Jonathan Huberdeau, maybe Huberdeau might, but again, these guys aren't getting younger. I'm taking the Flames out of that conversation for sure.
Yeah, but I think that's almost irrelevant because they didn't make the playoffs anyway. This conversation is about sort of like punching your ticket into the playoffs.
Sure, but neither did Vancouver, and they're in this conversation.
I mean, fair, but the point of the poll question was people are really confident that the Canucks are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah,
and I understand the optimism. But that's where it's like, okay, we'll have to see like which teams actually kind of fall out, because you could point to even a team like the Minnesota Wild and say, all right, they don't have the sexiest team on paper, but they're neutral compared to in terms of their offseason moves. And like they made the playoffs in a year where Kirill Kaprizov missed half the season. And he was as important to the Wild as Quinn Hughes. So we could have these conversations and a bunch of Canucks fans will say, oh, like a team like Minnesota could fall out. But meanwhile, Minnesota fans are thinking about this coming season going, well, Kaprizov missed half the year. He's as valuable to us as Quinn Hughes. If Kaprizov stays healthy, and especially Joel Eriksson too, who he only played 46 games. Like those are your two best forwards. Your two best forwards basically missed half the regular season. They're probably going, even if we're healthy, we're already a better team than we were. Not to mention when you look at Minnesota just historically, like they out with the exception of 2023-24, I want to say they've very consistently at least made the playoffs, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They've made the playoffs 4 of the last 5 years. So you can't just assume that a team like that is for sure going to come out. And same thing with St. Louis. And that's why I'm optimistic about the Canucks' chances, but it's not going to be easy by any means.
No, it's not a lock. Not a lock. All right. Do you have anything else on the Pacific you want to say before we get to anyone else?
No.
Let's do it. Let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians, who are on the road this week, but will be back at the Nat starting next Friday, July 18th, with a Friday nooner at the Nat. There's a fireworks night on Saturday the 19th, and as always, a family fun Sunday on the 20th. Kids get to run the bases post-game. Come celebrate Pride Night at the Nat on Tuesday the 22nd, and on Thursday the 24th, the Seas and Eugene will take part in a double header. 2 games, the first one starting at 1:05 p.m. For tickets, call 604-872-5232 or check out CanadiansBaseball.com. Walk said this in the chat. We have Quinn Hughes. LA doesn't. Elite talent will win out when it's a wash.
I mean, the problem is the Canucks have had Quinn Hughes for how many seasons? And LA has not had Quinn Hughes for how many seasons? And like, look at the success each team has had. Now you could certainly absolutely argue that the team that the Canucks have around Quinn Hughes is better than what they had around him really early in his career. But the point being, like, you had Quinn Hughes this past season. Quinn Hughes by himself ensures that you're not a lottery team. Like Quinn Hughes by himself is one of those like superstar players that no matter what happens around you, right? Where this past season, pretty much everything went wrong and they were still a 90-point team. They were still in the conversation just because Quinn Hughes is that special. But he alone doesn't guarantee you a playoff spot. Yep. And the Kings, they haven't had superstar talent, but they've made the playoffs 5 years in a row without elite talent. I think they've proven that they can at least make the playoffs without elite talent. It's more they can't get over the hump against Edmonton because they don't have the elite talent. That's when the problem sort of really arises.
That was another question. I can't remember who it came from. Sorry. Where'd it go? I want to find it. Okay, I can't find it. But someone asked, shout out to the listener, who I can't remember their name or see it. Someone asked, is LA good enough to beat Edmonton in the first round? I say no. They ain't. No, they ain't. No. They are not. Okay, we agree on that. Sky Training Canuck Alfred, friend of the show, said Tolopilo going to re-sign with the Canucks or no? RFA and is arbitration eligible? I would say yes. Name dropped by Patrick Alvin. Tolpilo's getting re-signed. I did want to plug this as well. A couple things I wanted to plug during anyone else. I had a conversation with Ty Young at development camp last week. I wrote about that. That's up now on CanucksArmy.com. It's titled Canucks, How a Focus on Having Fun Helped Ty Young Turn in a Massive First Season of Pro Hockey. Always enjoy my conversations with Ty Young, talk to him every year. And when I was talking to him at training camp last year, he didn't know where he was going to play. And again, the options were get traded in the WHL and go play somewhere else in the dub, play another year of junior hockey. He ended up turning pro and turning in the highest save percentage of anyone in the Canucks organization at any level, 922 in the ECHL. And through 11 games with the Abbotsford Canucks, he turned in a really, really solid performance as well. So his season was big. We talked about some work that he did with Adam Francilla, who obviously works with Thatcher Demko as well. That I believe, at least, that's the Kelowna-based trainer that Jim Rutherford keeps talking about that Thatcher Demko is working with, and the change to Demko's training and all that. That's with Adam Francilla, who now Ty Young is working with as well. He worked with him last summer. They do med balls on the ice. He was telling me about all the crazy stuff they do. And it's a really focus on like the movements and the preparation and the body side of goaltending. And it was a really interesting conversation with Ty Young, and he talked about that training and how important that was. But he did say the biggest thing for him was his mental game. That's where he feels like the biggest steps in his game came. And one thing he focused on last year, I don't want to give the whole story away. Go read it. It's a good one. One thing he focused on was like having fun. So he even said with, living out of a suitcase and living a pretty crazy life where you're in and out on buses all year long, you're up, you're down, you're all over the place. There's injuries in the organization on the depth chart. You're playing for different teams. You're getting to know different guys. He was just focusing on like having fun and the aspect of when you look back on that, you're never going to get to do that again in your life. So that was a really interesting perspective to have. And he's a really positive guy. He always has been. Every time I talk to him, like even I tried to capture that in the story, but even last year at training camp, when I was talking to him, I was like, I wasn't trying to be like scaring him or anything, but I was like, so how weird is it to not know where you're going to play? He's like, I don't care. He's like, I'm just here to stop pucks, and wherever they tell me to stop pucks, I'm going to go do that. And he always has a really good mindset, good vibe about him. So good kid, Ty Young. Shout out to Ty Young, who got name dropped along with Tolopilo in that press conference from Albion.
Yeah, nice nugget there on his mindset and the having fun side of things, because I know in having spoken to players, when you're in that grind mode of between the AHL and the ECHL, it's not a glamorous lifestyle. You don't have the amenities that you do at the NHL level. Obviously, you're not paid a ton. It's not like you're making millions. And for him to have that positive attitude, I think that's going to take him far.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. And it's going to be an interesting season. Someone's asking what he's going to do next year. AHL. That guy's got to be the guy in the AHL. And this is something interesting in the story as well. Like, I map out the AHL next year. It's a 3-man rotation, it looks like. I don't think Yuri Patera is going down to the ECHL. He's still signed for next year. And by all accounts, I think he's coming back next year. We'll have to find out what's going on with Yuri Patera soon. But we did see him. He is alive. We did see him during the Abbotsford Canucks celebration. But in all seriousness, I look at it and say Tolopilo's there, Ty Young's there, and maybe Patera's there. But Shelovs can't be there. Shelovs can't be back in the AHL. A, because he needs waivers and he'll get claimed. B, because I think this team needs to trade a goaltender. We'll see. We'll see how it ends up playing out. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. This team has a lot of goaltenders right now in the organization, so it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of map it all out. Now, this one was from Calgary Canuck. Are the Jets a wild card team now after losing Nick Ehlers? A tough blow for the Winnipeg Jets, losing Nick Ehlers, who of course signed with Carolina Hurricanes. The Winnipeg Jets, how do you view them right now, Harm?
I still view them as a playoff lock. I mean, they had 116 points, 56 wins. And it's the second year in a row where they've had a season where they've been undeniably elite in the regular season. The year before as well, they were second in the Western Conference with 110 points. They finished ahead of Vancouver in that 2023-24 season. So, yeah, Ehlers is going to be a blow. I expect them to be worse. But when you've had a 160-point season and 110 points before that, and you've basically been in the playoff conversation every year, and when you're backstopped by Connor Hellebuck especially, I still view them as a playoff lock.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with you. Okay. I also wanted to plug the video essay that Irfan Gafar did this over the weekend. It was a really, really good, and shout out to Jacob, obviously, and everybody behind the scenes, Clark, Lachlan, everybody behind the scenes that helped out with this. This was a great video essay on Danny Sabourin and Poopgate as well. We that's part of the story, and we broke down who Danny Sabourin is, the story behind all of that. It was a really, really good job by Irfan Gafar, and like I said, Jacob as well does such a good job putting those together and producing them. So the video essay, the next one, is up now on Canucks Army. You can check that out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. A lot of views on it right now, so keep showing it some love, folks. We love it. And the Dan Kluche one, do we know when that one's coming out, Jacob?
I was going to say, we're going to plug the next one. It's about Dan Kluche, and it's about a very specific moment that any Canucks fan who remembers the West Coast Express era will probably want to forget. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. But we're hoping for that one within the next week or two. Or just make sure you're subscribed. Turn notifications on. We're gonna have fewer Canucks combo episodes, but we'll supplement that with some good video essays throughout the summer.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Anything else, gentlemen, from either of you?
Nope.
All right. Then let's close this one out. Folks, fill out the Family Feud survey. We're playing on Wednesday when we're back for our final show of the week. How many more responses do we need, Jacob? Are we close, or where are we at?
I checked before the show when we were at about 65.
Okay.
Just checking right now. Let's see. Oh, we're up to 73. So the 8 of you who filled it out, thank you very much. I'm sure a bunch of people listening to the audio pod will get to it a little later this afternoon.
Yep, absolutely. All right, fill out this feud survey. We'll be back on Wednesday. Oh, but before that, let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day. Excuse me. Bet365 bet of the day. The Toronto Blue Jays are hot right now. Jacob, am I allowed to do parlays?
Yeah, you're allowed to do parlays. Earth does them all the time on Rinkwide.
Great. You can get Jose Barrios over 4.5 strikeouts and Toronto Blue Jays money line at plus 165 odds. You can parlay that for the Blue Jays to beat the White Sox and for Jose Barrios to strike out at least 5 White Sox. You can get that at Bet365, where your bet is never ordinary. Download the app and get on the game. Use the code NATION at Bet365. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right, we will close it out there. For my co-host Harmon Dial and our technical producer Jacob Lazar, my name is Dave Petrelli. Thank you so much for the episode of Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.